Tuesday, June 30th, 2020, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Before I begin today, I'd like to thank all my viewers, subscribers, supporters, contributors to Patreon, to PayPal, all those who have been using the Teespring store. Thank you very much again. And we end another month, and I'm going to talk about whether a new deal will work, and specifically for the UK. What is a new deal? Well, it was the program instituted by a socialist president in the United States. Well, of course, people say he was a Democrat, but he brought socialism to the United States in the early 30s as a result of the bubble or the roaring 20s, and then as a result of the bankers pulling the plug and basically ruining the United States. Of course, in the 20s, they were pushing everyone like they're pushing them now to invest in the stock market, a bit like the Robin Hood craze that's going on now. Of course, nowadays it's been going on for many, well, I would say decades, especially after the '08 crisis. They're pushing people again, not only in the US, but here as well, to keep investing in property, to keep flipping, to buy to let, taking on more debt, spending. I saw an article yesterday talking about that policymakers and central bankers and governments are worried that people are saving too much money here in the UK. And I thought that's crazy, but that's what happens in a fiat currency system. And that's what FDR did in 1933. He basically outlawed the ownership of monetary gold. Gold was money until 1933 in the US. So he took domestically the United States off sound money. And then, of course, he revalued gold in the beginning of 34. So the government ended up making billions from confiscating gold from the people, from the public. So that's the kind of guy Boris Johnson wants to follow in the footsteps of. He talked about a Rooseveltian effort he's been talking about. That's been all the hype in the last few days that I've noticed. A new deal for the UK. And if you look at the 1930s in the US, it didn't get much better. Eventually, it led to the US entering World War II. And why did Roosevelt do that? Well, I personally think one of the big reasons was that the economy wasn't doing well, and he needed a distraction, a huge distraction, of course. Am I saying this is going to lead to war? No, all I'm saying is that when government interferes in the market, it never works. It makes things even worse. Every percentage of government interference in GDP makes, in my opinion, the private sector that much poorer. And one of the great books that I highly recommend people read to learn about the fact that we can't live off the government, that we can't try to live off the government, because by doing that, we're trying to live at the expense of everyone else, and it doesn't make sense. Government needs to be very minimal. The function of government should really be to administer the rule of law, maybe defend, of course, the borders from foreign invaders, so to speak. But there's not much else that the government should do. So this is the book here, The Law by Frederick Bastiat. He was actually a politician, an economist, a philosopher back in the first half of the 19th century in France. He died quite young in 1850. I think he was 50. Let's go through what the book says here. It says, "It is impossible to introduce into society a greater change and a greater evil than this, the conversion of the law into an instrument of plunder." That's what Bastiat said. What does it mean? an instrument of plunder? Well, it means taxation. It means redistribution of wealth through legal means. And it's what we're doing here in the UK and everywhere else, US included. The excuse is the crisis, of course. It's always a crisis, the excuse. But all it is taking wealth from those who've worked all their lives and saved it and produced something of value and redistributing it to politicians, cronies, to these big projects, these New Deal projects. All it's going to do is line up the pockets of people who have contributed to these political parties in power. And it doesn't matter if it's conservative or Labor or Democrat or Republican. They're all at it until we change also our mentality in the general public that we don't need government to run our lives. This is never going to change. Wake up, people. So let's continue. France of 1850 was in political turmoil. Seems to always be. In the aftermath of the Revolution of 1848, the tide of socialism was sweeping the nation, while the tide of socialism is sweeping the world, I would say now. I remember going to a Libertarian Alliance conference in the Mall in London back around 2004 or 5. Don't remember the exact year. And there's a guy from the Libertarian Alliance or Party of the UK, Sean Gabbs, who spoke. And then guess who spoke after that? It was Boris Johnson. I don't think he was a politician at the time. But Boris Johnson's supposed to be a libertarian, and he's calling for a New Deal. It's almost comical. So it says here, one man stood alone against the tide of socialism. Well, that was Frederick Bastiat. So, so yeah, this is what he said about the state. The state, he declared, in perhaps his most memorable epigram, is that great fiction by which everyone tries to live at the expense of everyone else. So I made a video in the beginning of June, and I recommend you watch it. You probably have watched it already, maybe, but in relation to this New Deal that Boris Johnson is calling for, and it's called the German Currency Reset of 1948 and the Wirtschaftswunder. What does Wirtschaftswunder mean? Well, Wirtschaft is economics or economy in German, and Wunder is a wonder. So it's the German economic miracle that really did work after World War II, up until the 80s, and up until now, you could argue, Germany is still an economic powerhouse. But it wasn't done through socialism. It was done through budget rectitude, sound finances, sound money, and relatively free markets. And it was put there by the US military occupational forces. Of course, Germany did become a representative democracy after that. But the rules of budget balance, not spending fiat money for projects, running a sound money system, they were all put into the German Constitution with the help of the American military administration in Western Germany at the time. Am I saying we need a military government? No. But what I'm trying to say, why doesn't Boris Johnson and the politicians nowadays in the US, in the UK, and everywhere else in the world look at the German economic miracle for guidance? Why do they look at a bankrupt philosophy of socialism that doesn't work, that makes things even worse, that drives the world into war, like the New Deal? And don't forget, FDR took power, was inaugurated in 1933. Just think about what was the other leader that took power in 1933 in Germany, right? And he instituted the same kind of New Deal in Germany, a lot of government spending, infrastructure spending. Who do you think got the autobahns built in Germany? The German motorways or highways? Well, that was in the 30s, the infrastructure spending. And look what happened to the world in 1940. Look at what happened to the world in the 50s, 60s, and 70s with the German economic wonder. The world actually prospered relatively well. There were no wars or anything. So this is a bad idea, in my opinion. And so this was the headline yesterday in the Telegraph. I screenshotted it. It said, politics, latest news. Boris Johnson says it's time for a Rooseveltian approach to economy. Well, Boris Johnson needs to do his homework. And then I wanted to look at the U.S. Public debt to GDP when Roosevelt took office in 1933. Well, it was 20% of GDP. So he had at least a bit of room to increase government spending, and he did. As you can see here, by 1936, he doubled the debt to GDP to 40%. But now in the UK, we're above 100%. So we've already done all the deficit spending. We've already taken all the debt. And there's talk about as well that austerity is not the way, as if the conservative government, since Labour left power in 2010, as if they had austerity. That's another big fallacy. And am I a Labour supporter or any other party supporter? No. I support no political party. I support small government, rule of law, economic freedom, individual freedom. Yes, that's what we need, not more government. The more government we get, the less free we are. So here we go. So much for austerity. This is UK total public spending. And you see that the Conservatives with the Liberal Democrats came to power in 2010. And is that going down? Is that austerity to you, the spending? No, it's not. So I wanted to show you that. Same thing with the national debt. That's in trillions. You can see they came to power in 2010. Has the national debt gone down? Has there been austerity? No way. And that national debt now is jumped over 2 trillion, I would say, with all the debt that they've issued because of the current crisis. So it's not going to get the country anywhere. All it's going to do, it's going to make the government bigger. It's going to make legal plunder even worse. So my solution, of course, is to do the complete opposite. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. And why doesn't the right thing ever happen? Well, I think it's because right now government has been hijacked by special interests, the big corporate interests, the big financial interests that will benefit from even more and more government spending. You see, the big corporations, the financial interests, they're very few. There's only 5 big banks or so in the UK, or a few big corporations. And the government will go to these big companies to get their infrastructure projects, all their spending done. There will be very little competition. So all these big corporate financial interests will benefit the most. And that's why it never stops. And they also run the media. They run the schools. And you might say, well, we have state schools in the UK. Well, but who finances the government so the government can keep running the schools? It's all, how can I say, very incestuous. I saw the other day, for example, in the Bank of England website, there's a part there for educating children at school. And then I clicked onto one of the links took me to the Economist magazine intelligence section. So that's the kind of information they're feeding to the children in the state schools through the Bank of England. They're injecting them with this idea from the big corporations, from big financial interests in the UK. So that's what we're up against. So I'm here trying to fight these guys, saying that it's not the solution. The solution is, of course, small government, rule of law, justice run properly in a country as well, I would say, so that people can decide what to do with their money, that people can decide also what business they want to start. And usually when people do that in a free market, they're very careful. And it's not like government where they just borrow the money out of thin air and just start these projects. So the solution, I would say, to Boris Johnson or anyone else out there is to get government out of the economy, to scrap this Keynesian philosophy that has been infecting the world since the 1930s. That's the big infection, really. That's the real pandemic, Keynesian philosophy, and that's what we have to get away from. And we have to go towards freedom, small government, because government crowds out the private sector. So the more of this deficit spending and infrastructure projects, how many infrastructure projects do we need, really? So there you go. Let's quickly look at the markets this morning. It's 8:45 a.m. I'm a little later today. I saw the stock markets did really well yesterday. Yeah, the technical picture in the medium to longer term still looks a bit suspect, but be as it may, right now we've got gold at 1772. It's pretty much unchanged. The range has been 1768 to 1774. Silver is at 1786, unchanged as well. Big resistance right now around 18 and silver. The high today has been 1793 and the low 1776. The Dow future is down 64 points or 0.25%. S&P is down 5 points at 3,048. And the NASDAQ 100 future is up 0.2%. We got the British pound down into the 22 handle. We're at 122.80, down 0.2%. The euro's trading back towards 112. We had gone up above 113 recently. We're down 0.25% at 112.16. And the dollar is up 0.125% against the yen at 107.70. WTI crude is down almost 1% at 39.36. The 10-year U.S. Treasury yield is at 0.63. So actually, yields haven't really gone up, despite the fact that the stock market was up over 500 points, the Dow. So that's not a good sign. If we break through, let's say 0.6, we could see the stock market weaken again today. We'll have to see, though. There you go. Choose small government, free markets, rule of law over government spending, over this New Deal. It's not going to work. It's more socialism. Wake up. Socialism doesn't work. Socialism takes the incentive out of the free market. The free market is just a combination of all individuals in society interacting in a way that's not forced upon them. It's voluntary transactions. That's what the free market is all about. It's nothing evil or greedy or anything. I think what's greedy and doesn't work is socialism, because, and philosophically as well, as Bastiat says, you're like taking something from someone by force. because you have government power and giving it to someone who doesn't deserve it or might not do as good a job as in a free market. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button, share this video far and wide, think about subscribing to my channel if you haven't yet, and you can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Parlay, and all these other platforms below here. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.